as a Housing and Technical Resources Committee on 31st of May 2023. We have apologies from Councillor Bradley. I've noted Councillor Brogan present. We have apologies from Councillor Archie Buchanan, with Councillor Johnson Dempsey subbing. We have Councillor Matthew Buchanan, Councillor Kalikis, Councillor Convery present. Is Councillor Margaret Cooper? I can't see her online. Councillor Cowan, Councillor Devlin and Councillor Dewan are present. Councillor Fagan? No. We have Councillor Faulkner and Councillor Ferguson present. Apologies from Councillor Fulton. Councillor Gowland is present, thank you. Councillor Gray, not with us. Present are Councillor Lambie, Councillor Lennon, Councillor Lockhart, Councillor Mars, Councillor McCallan, Councillor McCreary, Councillor McLachlan, Councillor Ray, Councillor Shearer is present, and Councillor Walker is not with us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. The first item on the agenda is declarations of interest. Is there any declarations? No. The next item is item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. I'm going to move that as a correct record.
I'll second it.
Is there any questions or comments? No, thank you very much. Item 3 on the agenda is monitoring items, and it's the Housing and Technical Resources Workforce Monitoring January to March 23. I'm going to ask Cheryl Cumming to take us through that. Cheryl.
Morning, Chair. This is the Housing and Technical Resources Workforce Monitoring. This is a standard workforce monitoring report which is prepared by personnel. The purpose of the report is to provide committee with an update of employment information for the period of January to March 2023. Section 4.1 details the absence statistics. The resource absence figure for March 2023 was 5.9%, which represents an increase of 0.8% when compared to last month. Compared with March 2022, the figure has decreased by 3.1%. You will note that the March 23 figure is 0.5% lower than the council-wide figure. Based on the absence figures as at March 2023, the projected annual average absence for the resource for the year 22 to 23 is 5.9% compared to a council-wide average of 5.7%. Managers continue to follow the procedures outlined in our maximising attendance policy to support employees to remain at work and to return to work after absence. Personnel continue to work closely with the resource management teams to ensure that appropriate actions and supports are taken. Section 4.2 details the occupational health information found in Appendix 2. 149 occupational health referrals were made during this period, which is a decrease of 33 when compared to the same period of the previous year. Section 4.3 details the accidents and incidents statistics. There were 13 accidents and incidents recorded within the resource this period. This represents a decrease of 1 when compared to the same period last year. Monitoring of accidents and incidents reports will continue. At paragraph 4.4, discipline, grievance and dignity at work, members will see that the section details the employee relations activity for the resource for this period. This shows that there was 1 disciplinary hearing held, no grievance hearings and no dignity at work hearings, and 1 appeal was heard at appeals panel during this period. At paragraph 4.5, the analysis of leavers, again as detailed in Appendix 2, there was 13 leavers during this period eligible for an exit interview. 6 exit interviews were conducted. Participation of exit interviews is encouraged, but it is voluntary. At paragraph 4.7, it details that 29 employees, the equivalent of 23.9 FTE, left the resource, and managers have indicated that all of these posts will be replaced. Referring back to section 2 within the report, committee is asked to approve the recommendations to note the employment information for January to March 2023. Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions or comments? No, thank you very much. Item 4 on the agenda, it's items for decision, Housing and Technical Resources Plan 23 to 24, and that's over to Sharon Egan. Sharon?
Thanks, Chair. Morning, everyone. So just to take you through, the purpose of our report is detailed in section 1.1, and it's to seek approval for our Housing and Technical Resources Resource Plan for 2023-24. So section 3 of the report notes the background, confirming that the draft resource plan for 23-24 has been developed to reflect corporate requirements and is in line with the Council's wider performance framework. At 3.7, it's noted that subject to approval today at this committee, the report will be presented to Exec Committee on the 21st of June for noting. Section 4 at 4.1 notes that the Resource Plan 23-24 is attached as Appendix 1. Section 4 of the Resource Plan sets out the 35 key performance measures and 25 high-level actions which will provide the focus for the resource activity in the coming year. Section 4.2 highlights that the resource has established a number of objectives to support the delivery of the Connect priorities in 22-23. These are detailed in Appendix 2. Section 4.3 of the report confirms arrangements which are in place for reporting progress with the resource plan at Q2 and Q4 again to committee. So turning back to recommendations as detailed at Section 2 of the report, the committee is asked to approve the following: that the Resource Plan 23-24 as attached in Appendix 1 is approved, that the Resource Plan 23-24 be uploaded to the Council's website following consideration by this committee. Following committee approval, all resource plans will be presented to Exec Committee on the 21st of June for noting, and that progress reports on the resource plan will be provided at Q2 and Q4 to future meetings of this committee. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. I'm going to move that recommendation.
I'll second that.
Thank you very much. Who's Andrea?
Thanks. Thanks, Chair. It's obviously quite a big document, and I've got a few questions. I'll start off, and we'll see if you want to lump them together or not. Oh gosh, that's awful loud. Sorry. So first is page 34 of the agenda. It's page 10 of the policy, and it's about the fire tolerable standards for housing. These standards have now been in place since February 2022, and I see that we're sitting at 80% of our stock being meeting those standards, and I see the target is 90% going forward, which is obviously good news. I'm just wondering if we can have an update about supply issues and things that we'd heard about previously, and are we confident that we'll meet 90% in the next year given the problems we've had? Thanks.
Take it one at a time. John, would you like to address that one? Can you?
There you go. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor, for the question. I would confirm that the supplies issues have been resolved generally now across the portfolio, and in addition to that, we have had some issues with regarding to no access, etc., but we've got new policies and processes being developed to address that, so we are confident we'll be able to get up to the 90%. As an example, back in June 2022, in terms of electrical testing, we were down at 76%. We're now up at 92%. So there is good progress being made.
Okay. Andrea, have you got another point?
Sorry, yeah, I have. I've got a few things. And page 10 of the policy document at item 20, antisocial behaviour. Again, good performances over the last 2 years. And I just wondered why we were setting our target at below last year's achieved figure.
Sharon?
Thanks, Councillor Cowan. The target has been set at 90% in previous years, and although we always, well, the past 2 years we've always excelled in that, it's just been kept as remaining the same. However, I can certainly have a look at that moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, Andrea? Is there anything else?
On page 39 of the agenda, so this is page 15 of the policy, and it's action points 9 and 10, develop and implement customer involvement strategy and ensure effective involvement with tenants and other customer groups. Consultation, as we know, is always essential, and therefore I'm looking forward to the details of this coming back to committee. But can I just ask what steps we're going to take to ensure as wide a consultation as possible, to include as many tenants as possible, bearing in mind that a lot of our advertising as a council seems to be through social media, and I know that a lot of people miss that and don't use social media, especially the elderly and perhaps our more vulnerable tenants. So I just wondered how we were going to reach out to tenants. And I've said before, I'm concerned that we're becoming too reliant on digital technology and social media, etc., when we're dealing with tenants. So I just wondered how we were going to reach out. Thanks.
Thanks, Andrea. Sharon, again, please.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Cowan, yes, certainly we definitely do want to have significant engagement. This is a key priority for us moving forward this year, so consultation will definitely be required. We'll be involving our tenant participation groups. Locally as well, we're looking to see how we work with previous people who were involved, previous customers involved in the local housing forums. So we can also be utilising that as a vehicle, and our housing news will certainly want to be putting articles in there. We want to try and reach as many people. There's things happening locally as well, where we're trying to have, in the Hamilton locality particularly, a trial in surgeries, just now in some of the community hub places or third sector. And that's something that we really want to evaluate as a better way and means to be engaging with our tenants and customers. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. Is that okay, Andrea? And any other points?
Moving on a wee bit to action points 12 and 13. I'll just see if I can find what page they are. Apologies, this isn't my laptop. Mine's is locked in.
It's page 39 on the papers and 15 of the document.
So it's action points 12 and 13. I'm pleased that we've included a lot of our high priority groups, gypsy travellers, those living in sheltered housing. And I see further on in the document that we refer to care leavers and those leaving prison, which is all great. But I am disappointed to note that there's no mention of our veterans at all in this policy document. So I'd just like to have an assurance that the veterans will have services tailored to their specific needs going forward due to the fact that they've been omitted from the document. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Andrea. Sharon?
Councillor Cowan, that's noted. I'll take that forward. Also, just to update, we are doing a bit of a review and some work just now with Councillor Mark Horsham around veterans and how we consider those in our allocation policy moving forward when the allocation policy is reviewed the following year. So we've already had a bit of engagement with Mark around that and we'll continue to do so. But note your comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. Andrea?
16, so it's action point 15. The opening statement reads 100% of households identified as at risk are referred to appropriate statutory agencies. And I think this should go without saying and should always involve referrals to the likes of Women's Aid, Shelter and CAB, who can give legal advice where obviously our housing officers can't. Unfortunately, I'm hearing from council colleagues that constituents are not being offered signposting. In particular, one victim of serious domestic violence recently, she was provided with a safe place to stay, but she wasn't given any further advice, not even to contact Women's Aid. And that concerns me, and it concerned the councillor who was dealing with that case. I'm also concerned that with the cost of living crisis, we are going to see people coming to the council for help, particularly in housing, with rising homelessness, etc. People who've never had to deal with the council or have never been involved in these processes. And, you know, I'd just like an assurance that they will be signposted, and that perhaps some training along those lines would be suitable for staff. Thanks.
Sharon, yeah. Thanks, Andrea. Sharon, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Cowan, I've already picked this up locally with the service manager for our homelessness service, because certainly anyone that presents as homeless to us or seeking any sort of housing advice following domestic abuse should automatically be referred to Women's Aid. So I'll make sure that is picked up locally in terms of our homeless access and assessment service. Also in line with our housing options service, that should be key. Signposting is a big part of that role. In particular, as you mentioned, the cost of living crisis, we would certainly want to be referring people to Money Matters advice services. So I will pick that up with local service managers again. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. Andrea? Lovely. Have you got any more points? Is that you? Right, thanks very much for your questions. Is there anyone else got any questions or comments? Norman?
Thank you, Chair. It's just one point relating to on page 38 to 39, action point number 7 under community safety priorities achieved, and a project to upgrade public space cameras and install new cameras in hotspots. My reading of this is that this is more sort of outside spaces. I was just wondering if there was any consideration of indoor common spaces, for example, in high flats. I've had concerns raised about high flats in Cambuslang, and it wasn't possible to put CCTV at that time into them. So I'm just wondering if in the future if that's going to come into the consideration for expansion of CCTV.
With you in a second, Walter. Who's going to answer that one? Sharon? Thanks,
Chair. So there's a few different issues in terms of erecting CCTV within public spaces, and it's linked to the rules of what we can record, and it would capture people in their day-to-day living and their comings and goings. Also, we would need to link that in terms of future investment plans if we were to do that, and there'd be potential charges for owners within the multis, and we know that we do have owner-occupiers within the multi-stories in Cambuslang, so there's a few things that we need to take into consideration. We have used it, we have trialled it when we've had specific antisocial behaviour issues where temporarily CCTV has been installed in the common entrance area. However, that doesn't always capture everything that can happen in the multis. As you can imagine, the number of floors that there is, the lifts in the different common areas. So, but certainly can look at that in the future.
I do remember the past a presentation by the Antisocial Investigation Manager where there was cameras placed where, Sharon has suggested, where it had been deemed appropriate at the time. They've been very effective. I don't know how much that has been repeated, Sharon. It was John McKenzie. It was a long, long time ago, if you remember. And he gave sort of the presentation. You've seen some of the footage of images that were captured on these sort of discrete cameras that are placed around. Is that a common thing that we're seeing? Has that been repeated since that presentation all those years ago?
So we do have a number of cameras that were used in-house, which we will identify where we have hotspot antisocial behaviour areas, and we prioritise where those cameras would be fitted. However, they tend to be in outdoor spaces to capture, because we'll connect it up to street lighting or close lighting. So it's not necessarily within someone's residential area, because we need to consider that the multi-stories, that's somebody's home. When they go in that front door, it's the foyer area, it's part of their tenancy. But yep, we do, and we review where our hotspot CCTV cameras go.
Thanks, Sharon. Does that answer your question, Norman? Thanks very much. Walter, you're next, I think. Press your button.
Okay,
That's you.
thank you, Chair. This might seem a bit strange, but I was at a couple of the schools last week, and some of the things that came up were the maintenance and repair of their muggers, and it's my understanding that that's under housing and technical. And I'm just wondering if there's a programme that we can see at some point in time. The other question I had is, can we replace them with 3G pitches?
Nice try, Walter. Joanne?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. There is a life cycle maintenance investment programme for education and for schools, and we work with education to prioritise where they want expenditure on the schools and on the school's fabric. Muggers are within that, and that they can be looked at and replaced as part of that programme. But clearly the amount of funding we have within these budgets is finite, so it has to be part of prioritisation of all of the fabric of the school. So we don't have a separate budget just for muggers, it's part of the whole investment programme.
Walter? Answer your question. Thank you very much. Oh, do you want to come back? Okay. Right. You need to press your button, Walter.
Okay, that's fine now. Yeah, I just like to find out where the prioritisation process is, and if there is a list of schools and where they are in those priorities. I have spoken to education, but they keep backing me to housing and tech.
I know you've answered the question, but just for clarity, we'd be carrying out the work through your service, funded through education, so that would be acting on instructions of the education department. Is that correct? And that would be based on what they've got in funding. Am I correct in saying that? Not that straightforward.
No, it's not quite as straightforward as that, Chair. The prioritisation is what we start off with is a list of the older schools and what elements of fabric are now due for replacement and repair. So it's about protecting continuation of service. So we have all of the schools on this programme. Obviously, the older ones are coming to the top of the list in priority. So it includes things like roofs and windows. It includes things like boilers and services, and it includes muggers. So what we are doing over the next, creating basically a 5-year rolling programme of investment. It changes depending on what we find when we go out to schools. So it's all very well having a list of saying how old everything is, but it's then about how well is it working, how well is it managing? And those are the discussions that we would have with education about where the priorities are. And that evolves into a rolling programme. Every school is on it, but where it comes on the priority depends on the risk of failure of elements or where we can make efficiencies. For example, if we're going to do a new roof, can we add in insulation and make the building more effective? So there's a whole range of discussion that goes back and forward. There's not a list that says, here's the school we're going to invest in. We might invest in one school in one element and in another school in a different element, depending on what the failure of service might be. So to answer your question, it is a two-way process and discussion between education and housing and tech as to what the priorities are.
Thanks for that, Joanne. Well, should realise it's not part of this agenda, but happy for to organise a meeting. You can discuss that at length if you want to, but it's not part of this agenda, if that's okay. Okay, thank you very much. Janine?
Hi, it's a small procedural request on behalf of Councillor Ferguson. It makes the meeting much more accessible for Councillor Ferguson if he's able to see the speakers who's speaking at a glance by reading it on the screen. So if people in the room can ensure that they've got their cards in so that it's not coming up seat 4 or seat 8 when somebody's speaking.
Helen, does it work without the card being in?
We've had an issue with a couple of officers' cards just not working for this meeting this morning, hence just their seats are coming up. So apologies for that. We will get them fixed.
Is that, Janine, is it the officials that the Councillor Ferguson is not able to see?
In the main, it's coming up seat 8.
I see. Okay.
Okay, so just to
Okay.
bear that in mind so we can get
Thank
that
you.
fixed for Councillor Ferguson. Thanks.
That's noted. Well, just everyone's heard that, so if you can make sure that your card is in when you're speaking. Thanks, Janine. Is there any other questions or comments? No. So we'll move on to item 5 on the agenda. And that's the Pavilion at Alexander Hamilton Memorial Park, Stonehouse, asset transfer to Friends of Stonehouse Park. I'm going to ask Joanne to take us through that. Joanne?
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to advise committee of a community asset transfer request by Friends of Stonehouse Park and recommend the lease of the pavilion at Alexander Hamilton Memorial Park. The request for asset transfer was validated on the 11th of January, and following public consultation, 31 responses were received, all of which were supportive. The matters taken into account by the assessment panel when considering this request are set out in sections 3.6, 3.7 and 3.8 of the report. However, to summarise, the property is vacant and not required for operational purposes. It has a nominal value, and given its location within the park and its condition, would not achieve a market rent or a disposal. The Friends of Stonehouse Park are an established and experienced group who have delivered projects and events, often working closely with the council. And the project it proposed is phased in order to manage the financial risks and the opportunity to seek different pots of external funding. The proposal delivers community benefits in relation to health and well-being and strengthening communities. It represents best value for the council, and therefore I would recommend that the grant of the lease on concessionary terms as set out on section 5 of the report. Thank you, Chair.
I'll second that.
And I see I've got David Shearer. David?
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to welcome all the great work that has been done by this community group, and I am certain that they will make good use of the pavilion and it will be a benefit to the community of Stonehouse. So I welcome this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, David. They are a very well organised group, and I recently attended the opening of the bandstand at Stonehouse Park, and that was the community all getting together. It was a really fabulous event. So yeah, I agree with you there, David. Thanks very much for that. Any other questions or comments? No, so we'll move on to item 6. Sorry, Walter, did you want to come in?
Yes, please, David. Yeah, I'd just like to commend the officers' input in this. I think they've been absolutely fabulous, and I know they're helping me out in a few projects in my area, and they're going above and beyond. So I'd just like to say thank you for that.
Thanks, Walter. That's appreciated. Item 6 on the agenda is the fountain at 911 Abbey Green, Lesmahago, and it's a lease to Lesmahago Development Trust. Joanne?
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to advise committee of a request by Lesmahago Development Trust for a lease of the fountain in Lesmahago and to recommend the terms of a concessionary 1-year lease agreement. In March 2023, South Lanarkshire Leisure Board advised that they would no longer be delivering services from the property known as the fountain in Lesmahago. Lesmahago Development Trust then approached the council seeking an arrangement that would enable them to operate the facility in parallel to them being able to develop a community asset transfer request. Although the proposal being presented to committee today is not a community asset transfer request, it's not gone through the statutory process, we have applied the same logic to assessing the request. Sections 3.5, 3.6 and 3.7 of the report set out the matters that have been taken into account in considering the application. And in summary, the property is currently vacant and there are no immediate alternative proposals or operational demand. Lesmahago Development Trust is a well-established organisation with a strong track record in delivering projects, including managing property. and the 1-year lease will ensure continuation of services in the local community, relieve the council of vacant property costs, and allow the Development Trust time to develop robust plans for a community asset transfer. I therefore believe that the 1-year lease presents an opportunity to the council, and I recommend the terms and conditions set out in section 5 of the report.
Thank you very much. I'll move the recommendations.
I'll second that.
Thank you very much. I'll get Ross Lambie first, then Ross Gowland.
To give my support to this. Les Mahigo has been really hard hit by the closures of SLLC. Not only did they lose the fountain, which is a great multi-use facility with commercial kitchens and soft play and all sorts of things, they also lost their access to their gym and, you know, much more restricted access to their sports halls. So I commend the work done by Les Mahigo Development Trust. They really have sprang into action and put this together really quickly, because it's not just a small community hall, it's quite a large facility, and they're doing a great job. So I just want to give it my full support. Thank you.
Thanks, Ross, very much for that. Ross Gowland, please.
Thanks, Chair. So as one of the local members for Les Mahigo, I'd like to say how happy I am that the lease to the Les Mahigo Development Trust just went ahead. There's been a degree of anxiety in the community about potentially losing the fountain as a community space, and many community groups, as was said, did rely on the fountain as a facility. So many in Les Mahigo can probably remember the closure of the Jubilee Hall in Les Mahigo, and we didn't want a repeat of that. So very much happy that the move has went ahead. Okay, thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Equally delighted with that one as well. So anyone else? No other questions or comments. The next items on the agenda are items for noting. That's 7 to 10. I propose to move all those recommendations on block. Does anybody like to second that?
I was waiting for someone to object, and I spotted Councillor Cowan's lights on. I'm happy to second it, but I'm interested to hear what Councillor Cowan has to say.
If anyone's got any questions on any particular item, I'm happy to take it. Andrea.
I do. I wanted, well, first of all, I wanted to welcome in agenda item 7, the cut fuel bills, cut carbon emissions, kickstart the economy. That I see that coming through in practice, and that's great following the recent passing of that motion. Hopefully that will provide not only cut bills for the council, but provide a healthier working environment, because sometimes when you come into these offices, it's like working in a sauna. So I think turning the heating down is a great policy, and I welcome that. I also wanted to say, in Table 8 in this policy update, just to say that it's great to see the numbers of community asset transfers increasing, and pleased to see and hear that the process is being simplified, because it sounds like a terrifying thing to take on a building for a lot of community groups who are volunteers. So I'm really glad to see that the process is being simplified. So really just a couple of comments on that. Will I move on, or does I see Walter flashing?
If there's no question, I'm happy to take any other comments.
Not Walter, sorry, Norman.
Norman, can you come in? What is it? What item you want to
Yeah, it's item number 8, and it's point 4.2 or thereabouts. Just relating to, it seems that the cost has gone up due to additional costs that the developer hadn't included for the electrical vehicle charging points. I was just wondering why that additional cost falls on the council to pay the developer, when it appears from that it's the developer that made the original error in not including that. Oh, that's how I read it anyway. So,
yeah, thanks for raising that, Norman. It's not just as simple as that, and I'm sure Joanne will elaborate. Joanne.
Thank you, Chair. The change was actually due to a change in planning regulations that happened just at the point that we were doing with this transaction. So the original planning requirements were for the infrastructure for EV charging to be in place, and the new planning regulations require it to actually be activated and there. So it was unfortunate that during those negotiations, the planning situation changed. So for all future developments, the EV charging has to be part of it, but it wasn't when we started the discussions.
Does that answer your question, Norman? Thank you very much, Joanne. Anyone else? Andrea again.
Hi, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I had a similar point to Walter's, and while it's £166,000, which is it's a lot of money, but it's not a huge amount of money in an £8 million transaction. But I felt in the reading of it as well that we were being asked to pick up Taylor Wimpey's omission. And the other thing that concerns me is that at last Housing Committee, we were asked to okay the VAT payment. And I know that didn't have any financial implication on the council in real terms, but that's 2 committees in a row where we've been asked to, agree to something where there's been an omission. And I'm just concerned that that's, as I say, twice. And perhaps we need to just be maybe sharpen our pencils a wee bit and be a wee bit more careful with these things.
Okay, I take your point about the VAT, but you said it yourself. It has no financial implication on the council. It's an exercise. It didn't cost us anything. It was just. Well, it wasn't, because it was something that the developer had introduced after we had negotiated with them. I'll ask Joanne to go into that in a bit more detail, but it is an item from a previous agenda, but I'm happy for Joanne to explain that again if it wasn't clear the first time. Joanne.
I'm clear on how it works.
Well, it could be 6 committees in a row, because this is Section 37C is a facility that we use when we need to use it. And if you need to use it every committee, that will happen. But it's just, if you're uncomfortable with that, it's unfortunate that it's happened twice in a row, but there's no consequences to the council on the VAT issue. This one has been explained by Joanne. There was a change in planning legislation. We were just sort of caught in the middle of it. So Joanne, the VAT one, could you just touch on that again, please? You don't? That's fine, Joanne.
It's fine, though. Just to say that a lot of it is down to the timing that we bring this to committee. So I agree with you, and I would say that the officers were equally frustrated that we had 2 such situations as this. However, you don't have 100% of a concrete contract available when we report to committee, because we couldn't do 100% without committee approval. So what we have is principal heads of terms. So quite a lot of the detail comes out beyond that. So we are looking at the timing of when we come to committee and generally how we will phrase the recommendations in future to try and avoid the need for this. But as the chair has said, with all the transactions and all our reports, sometimes when you get into the very detailed follow-up after committee approval, there are things that come up are unknown. But we are conscious of trying to improve on that going forward.
Joanne, Andrea, nobody likes to do these things, but sometimes if you wait to a committee cycle before you can make a decision, it causes such a hold up, and it's good that we do have this in place. It's open and transparent. There's nothing underhand going on. It's just something that's there. It does happen occasionally. Just coincidentally, it's happened in 2 committee cycles in a row. But I've got no concerns about it. And if you have got concerns, then I'm happy to discuss that with you. If you wanted to meet, have a chat about that, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, largely what I was hoping to say has been covered by Councillor McLaughlin, but the one thing I want to flag up, particularly to any of the officers that are listening, is I'm always quite reassured when I see errors being caught, or not that these are errors, but complications being highlighted and being reflected to the committee. I think if we were presented with papers that always told a story of kind of seamless progression of projects, and nothing unexpected ever coming up, then that would maybe ring alarm bells that there were things that were being resolved without it coming to the committee, so we can get scrutiny. So no one likes when there are complications, but I find it quite reassuring when things like this are highlighted, because I think it helps develop our understanding of how complex some of these projects actually are to deliver.
Thanks, Martin. Okay, Andrea. Did you want to come back in about something else?
Yeah, I do, thanks. This is on agenda item 10, the notification of contracts. So it was really just to ask if in future we could have not necessarily the full address of the contractor, but if we could perhaps be notified as to where they're roughly located. And I suppose what I'm saying is that they're as far as possible located within South Lanarkshire, just so that we can see if there's any increases. I know that's the policy to try and to try and give contracts to people within South Lanarkshire to progress community wealth building. So it's just a request going forward if we could have some more information on where the contractors are located. Thanks.
We'll take a note of that. Joanne, is there anything you'd like to add? Can you go?
Thank you, Councillor. It won't necessarily be possible to put in the addresses. A lot of the companies we deal with are national, but they have local sub offices and they have local subcontractors. And at the time we prepare this report, we won't necessarily know who all those subcontractors are going to be. But what we will do is look and see if there's something to do with the scoring of community benefit that we can put into the report.
Thanks, Joanne. Okay, Joanne, Andrea. Okay, any other questions or comments? If not, I thank you all for your attendance. The date of the next meeting is the 30th of August. So have lovely summer holidays, everyone. I know I will.